Welcome back, and been looking forward to our special guest today, J.T. Young, author of a fascinating read called The Unprecedented Assault: How Big Government Unleashed America's Socialist Left. He has had more than 3 decades experience working in Congress, the Department of Treasury, the Office of Management and Budget. His op-ed pieces have appeared in the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and many other publications. On the screen, you do see now a picture of the cover of his book, Unprecedented Assault. You may want to check that out, and I'm sure you can get that online. JT, good to see you. Thanks for your time. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me on this morning, Perry.
Yeah, you bet. This is how'd you survive? and to come up with a book like this, what did you put on your cereal in the morning? Why did you go after it? Why did you write this book?
You know, I think probably the same reason, Perry, that you found yourself scratching your head over the last few years, and so many of your viewers the same way. I would see episode after episode that you thought, this can't be happening. Defund the police movement, a DEI initiative so radical that they put quotas over qualifications, an extreme environmental agenda that's completely radical. And with each episode, you thought, well, this is an aberration. And then when the next followed it, you realized, no, this is a continuation. And that what was in each, as you started to look more closely, was you saw the fingerprints of the socialist left. Sometimes it was blatant that people who were the organizers of these new initiatives were out and out admitted. Others were that their proposals just followed the idea of centralization of power and agendas that were shared by the socialist left. And that brought me back to an old question, because my background is really academics. And there's been an age-old question about American politics, which is, why is there no socialist left in America? And suddenly I realized, well, we now, for the first time, have one. And so I wanted to answer that question. I needed to find an explanation. What is making this appear in America for the first time? And so that was the genesis for the book. And the book is really just my explanation as to why this is occurring now.
Okay, boy, there's so much to unpack here. Do you think overall, just for maybe the 30,000-foot view and what's happened, maybe even as a result of the election cycle, that the pushback has started?
I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful, and I think we all have to take that. But there's really 2 confluences of trends here. The long-term trend, which is what the book's title is about, which is that unlike other countries where the socialist left took power and they built a big government to implement their proposals, has been the reverse here. Which is, we've seen a big government build up, and now all the socialist left had to do was access a government that's already large. And so that's the short-term trend, which is the current administration for the next few days, still in power, has given the socialist left the greatest access to power that they've ever had in America's history. So to your point, yes, I'm hopeful that we're seeing the end of their access to power, but the underlying foundation, and hopefully the current administration, and I do take hope from the idea of this Department of Government Efficiency, that we are going to, for the first time, start to look at what the government is spending its money on, where that money is going, how it's being used. And so back to your question, yes, I'm hopeful, but we can't take our eye off the ball, really.
Okay. That makes sense. So let me ask you this. How intimidating is it to be inside government to shut up and not say anything?
It is. obviously every administration is different, but I think it's very much that way, that you know what the line is, and as to what you have to toe, and that everyone who's in there will feel, that pressure. And I think you've always felt it. And, there would be people who worked, obviously, when I was on Capitol Hill and in administrations, I was completely and clearly a Republican and a conservative. But you would meet people who were career people who were just in government, and do a fine job, and actually had, similar beliefs, but would feel themselves very intimidated as to how they could express those. And so you would find it a very guarded sense of support and things like that, where, people would say, well, yeah, I share your views and things like that, but they were very circumspect about where and how much they could actually say that, because they knew another regime can come in, and they certainly knew the prevailing sentiment within the overall bureaucracy.
It seems, JT, that conflict and misery is kind of like the fuel in the tank. The more that they can commit or produce in the way of conflict and misery, it advances their cause. And as I look at this, and maybe I'm wrong, but it was a saying that I picked up quite a while ago. It was the victim, villain, savior thing, and that is they create the villain to have a victim. They're actually the villain, but then they create the victim, then they come back and go from villain to savior. I mean, is that how they move the ball forward on this?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, and it's really sad when you see the indoctrination that's coming in, and things that don't fit their template, get no attention whatsoever. So we have college campuses that are carrying out protests in support of terrorists against Israel, and then declaring that the Israelis are perpetrating genocide. And at the same time, you have actual genocide going on in a country like Sudan, and not a word is mentioned. You have naked aggression of Russia invading Ukraine. Not a word is mentioned. And the reason is it doesn't fit their template. Just the point you were making. They've already cast a villain. You've got, if you are part of Western culture, you are automatically seen as an oppressor. And so they can cast people into that role. In the case of Israel, Israel is a staunch supporter of the West, and thank God for them standing up for our values and against a terrorist regime. But to the left, they fit the mold and the identity group of being a member of the West, so that makes them an oppressor, and whoever they're fighting against then becomes the victim, and it falls right into the pattern you're talking about. And anything that doesn't, they're blind to it. When you have Russia and Ukraine at war, hundreds of thousands of people killed and made homeless, and casualties on top of that, but to them, that's two Western European countries fighting each other. Who cares? They don't see it. It doesn't fit their template.
How did they get away blaming us for what they're doing?
It's a great question, and this is something that you see is endemic to the left. They always tar people with their sins. That what they will call you're the racist, and even at the same time that they are promoting standards that explicitly take into account race or gender or whatever. This is endemic to what they do. This is who they are. They use against, our values against us. They know it puts us on a defensive. There's a great book that was written half a century ago by a man named Saul Alinsky. You're probably familiar with it.
Right.
And it's called Rules for Radicals. And it's a really short read. And so when they're finished reading my book, they should go read that one, because it's only about 100-something pages. And it is a textbook primer that he wrote. I mean, he was a radical organizer from the 70s, had grown up in the heyday of that period. And he explicitly talks about you've got to use their values against them. It doesn't mean they support them. They don't at all. They're just means to their end. And their end is, of course, power and restructuring society in their own image. But, just to the point you're making, they're going to call us things that we feel like, and rightly so, are things that we find abhorrent. So they're going to put us on the defensive from the immediate, and you'll notice that then allows them to control the dialogue. You spend your time, instead of looking at the horrendous policies that they're proposing or following and the consequences thereof. Instead, you're spending all your time defending yourself against this charge that's baseless, but it takes up the time. And whenever you're defending, you're losing. Yeah. And they know that.
Let me say our viewers and listeners, honored to have with us today J.T. Young. He's the author of a fascinating book. It's called Unprecedented Assault. There's a picture of the cover of the book on the screen there, available online. Well experienced in government, Congress for years, Department of Treasury, Office Budget and Management, and you'll see his op-ed pieces in places like the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and around. J.T., I can't help but think that this is maybe based in my faith that I asked this question, but how can the left, or is the left's conscience so seared that they can go against nature and nature's God and call it okay? What happened to them? I mean, they seem to have lost sense.
Well, I mean, again, you notice one of the first things that's always silenced in any socialist left regime is areas of faith. And that goes, if it was the case of Eastern Europe, the Catholic Church. Look at who stood against the communists there. Pope John Paul II. They silence in Tibet the Tibetan religion there. And wherever it is, they go after organizations that they see as a threat to their total power. And obviously, religion is. It orders the life of people of faith. And that's anathema to them. I mean, they feel their ideology should order their lives, and it should order your life as well. And that's what they're aiming for. So anything that's a threat to that, they're going to go after. Okay. And, you see that repeatedly.
So, again, I don't want to drill down on this too hard, but how do you go against the human conscience on some of this stuff? Is it evil?
Well, I think their conscience is so warped, and obviously not everybody who supports what they think are the causes that are advanced by the socialist left, because they put those causes into a framework that makes them look like common sense. I mean, how would you say that a certain identity group's life doesn't matter, or that they, of course, we're going to be against oppression for this group. So they always are going to cast things into a certain light. But I do think the people who are truly members and the true believers, not just the people that they used to call the useful idiots who go and follow in their wake, but the true leaders of this, they have an entirely different orientation. Mm-hmm. I mean, read the works of Marx and Engels. Read the works of Lenin. Look at any of the dictators, whether it's Joseph Stalin. Go back, and these are people who do not have what you and I would call any anchoring in morality. Their morality is completely different. It's completely reordered. And, sadly, we have people like that. Yeah. And it's just, And thank goodness we have places for them called prisons, that people who just cannot and refuse to live in a society of values and accept standards of conduct that are, in our mind, moral and decent and law-abiding.
The socialist movement, the left, the progressive, whatever term you want to give it, seems to have taken a major blow in this election cycle. The whole fiasco of moving President Biden aside, Vice President Harris going forward, it just went from bad to worse. And it continues to melt. I mean, look at the left media. They're losing audience like crazy. Right. This could be a huge setback. It may be decades before they find their footing again. Or am I being too optimistic?
No, I think you're right. I mean, this is the paradox that the left has always had in America. It goes back to the original question of the book. Why is there no socialist left in America? The fact was, the socialist left never had anything to offer Americans before, and what they had to offer, Americans rejected. We were just not in any way sympathetic. We had no legacy for it, and they had nothing that they could entice people with. And I think, just as you mentioned, what we have seen in the last election, what we're seeing now as these policies have been implemented by this administration or in various states, in various locations, and you're seeing the results of that. I mean, you're seeing illegal immigration from an open border policy. You're seeing the fallout from putting DEI over qualifications. You're seeing the result of an extremist environmental agenda. As people see that, they're starting to realize, I don't want this. This doesn't make sense. I think they get enticed by, yes, of course I care about the environment. Yes, of course I care about minority people. Yes, I care about making sure people are treated fairly. But then they see what's advanced under these benign banners by the socialist left. They see the fallout, that these policies are nothing like what they were advertised, and I do see a wholesale rejection of that. And hopefully we're going to see that build a momentum and continue.
It's interesting because I think you really nailed it by saying whatever they offered we didn't want, and whatever they offered didn't have any life to it. But they were masters, or are masters, at selling fear. Do you think fear may be mortally wounded for a while?
Fear is definitely a driver, and without question. And you started our segment at the very beginning. I mean, never has there been a more miserable ideology than the socialist left. Everything to them is conflict. Everything is hatred. Everything is, in classical Marxism, is, the capitalist versus the proletariat. Everything's a conflict, a zero-sum society, instead of our capitalist mentality, which is both parties benefit from free exchange. We are all advanced. They are a humorless group, a very sad and embittered group, and seemingly will not be satisfied until everyone is as miserable as they are. But certainly fear is something, and you see it driven. You're always seeing this in the environmental agenda, that we're reaching a point that's yet never attained, that is going to be a tipping point that we'll never be able to go over. We'll go over this threshold and we'll not be able to come back. We never reach it, but it's always hung out there. So unless we do this, we're seeing, that is held out there. Yeah. And I think you see that in area after area of that they try to instill fear and drive people to say, oh, I've got to prevent this greater evil, so I will accept this minor, or relatively minor inhibitants to my freedom in order to avoid this greater catastrophe. So they frighten people.
All right, let me
Yes.
take a quick break. So honored to have with us today J.T. Young. Check out the book entitled Unprecedented Assault, How Big Government Unleashed America's Socialist Left. There's a picture of the cover of the book. I'm sure you can get that online. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back, and what an honor to have with us today J.T. Young. He's the author of a fascinating book called The Unprecedented Assault on How Big Government Unleashed America's Socialist Left. Again, there's a picture of the cover of the book. He has written articles in the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and other publications. He's been involved in Congress for over 3 decades with the Department of Treasury, the Office of Management and Budget, so he's in the know. Again, by the way, JT, you have a website, jtyoung.com. Thank you. And the book, I'm assuming, is online. I've been saying that. Is that true?
Right, and it's jt-young.com.
Oh, there it is. Okay, jt-young.com, and there's the picture of the landing page. Okay, love him or hate him, President-elect Trump is seen as a fighter. And that seemed to be an amazing attraction and perhaps a huge factor in his win among a lot of the issues. But it did unleash, being a fighter, unleashed hope in a lot of people. Hope that there's a future, hope for the family. And that seems to almost be catching on globally. Or am I overemphasizing it?
No, I mean, it's amazing. The point you're making, you are seeing the ramifications of Trump's victory. And I think as conservatives, we tend to, we go about our business. And sometimes we don't take enough time to pause and see the magnitude that Trump's victory really was. The left is already trying to downplay it, but he won the popular vote, which is astounding when you think of the vote surpluses that are rung up by Democrats in California and New York. He still not only he eclipsed those, he ran several million votes ahead despite the inside track that they get from their California and New York vote totals. And so what you're talking about, I think sometimes people who are farther away from the epicenter where it hit here see it more clearly. I mean, we have seen Justin Trudeau basically having to step down. We have seen difficulties in France with their government. I think you're starting to see a problem with the British Labour Party in the United Kingdom. You can just tick over and over and over that there is a movement that is going towards conservative values. And I think different issues are driving in different countries. I mean, as we're speaking right now, we're going to have a huge protest, I think, in Venezuela against an out-and-out socialist, Maduro, down there, who didn't win the election and yet is going to refuse to relinquish power. And we're going to have to see how that plays out. But you are seeing this over and over again across the globe, that conservative principles are prevailing, that there's a pushback against the socialists, there's a pushback against the radical left in country after country. I can't think of a place right now where you see the tide going in the other direction.
Well, the Trudeau thing was just amazing. The threat of a tariff draws him to Mar-a-Lago. A month and a half later, he resigns. Farage votes in Parliament may triple. We'll see where that goes. And Macron, as you said, I don't know if he survives. I mean, that's going to blow up in its face. I mean, you're absolutely right. You kind of scratch your head and you're kind of going, who opened the door here? Was it him? Was it Trump?
I think there's just a movement. I mean, we cannot ignore the fact that the socialist left has had the bit in their teeth for, several years, and they have pursued policies that run against common sense. They run against the technology that we have. I mean, you've seen Europe has basically made themselves energy paupers as they have gone to a radical left environmental agenda that has, results in enormous energy costs. It results in people not having enough energy, and they've hamstrung themselves. And I think people are seeing this and they're reacting to it. I mean, you are seeing some of the same episodes in the state just to south of you. Yeah. In California with these wildfires, I'm very curious to see how this plays out. But it seems very clear that the Los Angeles mayor is in well over her head. She wasn't up to the moment, and as the moment progresses, she falls further and further short of it. So I think these sort of examples are being shown to people around the world, and it may be different, a different cause for each place, but it's the same result. Which is,
I think in California, look, right now it's just tragic. But when the dust settles, so to speak, and we look back on this, you're going to find out that the incompetence of leadership throughout the entire state is just horrendous as a result of this leftist agenda. But, I want to come back to your book just for a moment, JT, and that is, you talk about expanding federal programs, and in that, it just creates, obviously, more federal control. And here comes DOGE. And I realize they don't have any power, but they can certainly take the recommendation to the person who does. Where do you think this is going to go?
Well, I'm hopeful that it's such an enormous task, so at least they're starting it. That is huge. Just the very fact is sort of like, Perry, probably if you're the same way I am, I have some room in my house where everything goes behind a door and I don't have to see it anymore. And just the opening of that door that makes me start to realize I need to get in here. I need to see what's here. Why is this being saved? What is this supposed to do? We need to do the same thing with a government that spends almost a quarter of the nation's GDP. And I think about that. 25%. Approaching 25% of everything that America produces is spent by the federal government. And that doesn't take into account the costs of regulations, which I would bet that you have viewers who are watching this show and they're nodding their heads thinking, my taxes are too high, but if I run a small business, the government regulations that I have to deal with are even more expensive to me than writing a check. We need to get under the hood, and hopefully, the DOGE will begin that process of let's get some sunlight in here. What are we spending the money on? Who's the money going to? There's no accountability, and that hopefully the beginning of this will be saying, yes, we want certain programs, but we want them to adhere to what their original intent was, helping people who can't help themselves for a temporary period of time until they're able to take care of themselves. They're not meant to be a perpetual existence for a growing percentage of the American people.
Well, we have a capitalist, a business person, somebody knows how to read a balance sheet and a P&L. And get in there and go for the ROI, if I can put it. Are these programs resulting? We're out of time, JT, but you're fascinating. Can we get you back?
Of course you can. I've enjoyed every moment of it, Perry, and it's great talking to you.
All right, let me say to our viewers and listeners, go to jt-young.com. That's his website. There's a picture of the landing page. And check out the book, Unprecedented Assault, How Big Government Unleashed America's Socialist Left. Thank you, JT. Best to you, friend. Look forward to another visit.
You too. God bless.
God bless.